Have you ever wondered how something so powerful can be so easily overlooked? What happens when the world underestimates a force that once ruled the battlefield, only to have it rise again, proving its unmatched significance? In the early years of the 20th century, this was the story of French artillery, the queen of battles, which, despite its vital role in past conflicts, was undervalued for much of the century. This isn't just a story of missed opportunities, but one of resurrection, innovation, and ultimate supremacy on the battlefield. French artillery has been an integral part of military history for centuries. Dating back to the Napoleonic Wars, French cannons and guns had already left their mark as weapons of devastating power and precision. However, as time passed, particularly after World War I, the grandeur of artillery began to fade in the eyes of the military world. By the time World War II loomed on the horizon, many nations had shifted their focus to the allure of tanks and airplanes, with artillery being relegated to a support role. But French artillery was no mere support. It was a force in its own right, one that had been underestimated and even ridiculed. Critics claimed that the French had fallen behind technologically, that their reliance on outdated strategies and designs would lead to disaster. The world began to view French artillery as a relic of the past, unfit to stand against the mighty tanks and sophisticated air forces that defined the new age of warfare. However, what the world didn't know was that French artillery was about to wake up, and when it did, it would remind everyone why it had earned the title Queen of Battles. As tensions rose in Europe, France's military leaders knew that something had to change. The traditional methods of artillery warfare would not suffice in the new conflict. This was the time for innovation, and the French army set to work on refining their artillery strategies. They began focusing on mobility, precision, and coordination factors that would soon set them apart from other nations. Their artillery was no longer just a slow, lumbering force behind the front lines. It was about to become a game changer, altering the course of battles in ways no one expected. The turning point came in the early stages of World War II. As the German forces blitzed through Europe, many predicted a quick and decisive victory. France's military, with its old-fashioned tactics and equipment, was thought to be doomed. But the underestimated artillery began to show its true strength. In the thick of battle, French artillery was quick, responsive, and deadly. It struck with a precision that defied expectations, breaking through enemy lines and leaving German forces reeling. Despite the initial success, the French artillery's awakening was short-lived, and much of the world soon forgot its power. But even when the world was no longer watching, French artillery continued to evolve, its influence carrying through later conflicts and shaping the artillery strategies of the modern world. It proved that true power is often hidden behind the most overlooked forces. This opening chapter in the story of French artillery is a testament to the fact that even when the world fails to recognize the potential of a force, it can rise up redefined and stronger than ever. But the question remains, how did this queen of battles, once dismissed as obsolete, come to dominate the battlefield again? What made it so devastatingly effective when everyone thought it had been left behind? If you're fascinated by the incredible resurgence of French artillery and want to dive deeper into its hidden history, don't forget to leave a comment below. What do you think made French artillery so effective after being dismissed by the world? Could modern armies benefit from revisiting older tactics like this? Let us know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this fascinating look into the underrated power of artillery, please hit the like button. It helps us share more untold stories like this with others. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications. we've got plenty more stories from history that you won't want to miss. French artillery has long been regarded as one of the most potent and influential forces in military history. For centuries, it has been at the forefront of battles, influencing the outcome of wars, and earning the prestigious title of Queen of Battles. But how did it come to be known as such? And why has its legacy endured through the ages despite its periodic underestimation? The story begins long before World War I, with France's military artillery, setting the standard for much of Europe. From the time of the French Revolution, artillery played a pivotal role in shaping the course of military engagements. French generals recognized early on that artillery could break the enemy's spirit, distort their formations, and inflict heavy damage from a distance. This understanding of artillery as an instrument of psychological warfare and destruction laid the foundation for what was to come. As the 19th century unfolded, French artillery would continue to evolve, leading the way in technological advancements. By the time of the Napoleonic Wars, the French had developed highly effective artillery tactics that included massed formations and carefully timed volleys. Napoleon Bonaparte himself famously relied on artillery as a primary force in his military campaigns. It wasn't just about the sheer volume of firepower. It was about precision and control qualities that would define French artillery for years to come. The French artillery's most notable victory came at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805. The decisive moment came when Napoleon's artillery decimated the Russian and Austrian forces, delivering a blow that not only crippled the enemy's formations, but sent a powerful message about the French military's dominance in artillery warfare. The French had mastered the art of artillery barrages, using speed and timing to unleash a devastating wave of firepower. It was this expertise that earned artillery the title of Queen of Battles, the overwhelming force that could control the tempo of a battle. But this dominance was not to last forever. After World War I, artillery was overshadowed by the rise of tanks, airplanes, and other technological innovations. Despite its storied past, artillery was relegated to a supporting role considered too slow and outdated in the face of modern mechanized warfare. It seemed that the Queen of Battles had been dethroned. However, as the world moved into the early 20th century, the French military, despite its challenges, began to reevaluate artillery's place in warfare. The world had underestimated it once, but the future would soon prove its value again. While other nations focused on their tanks and air power, the French saw a future for artillery that was not just static, but dynamic, capable of being used with speed and precision. French engineers and military strategists worked tirelessly to improve the mobility and effectiveness of their artillery systems. They designed new equipment and improved on existing models, ensuring their artillery was not just a force of destruction, but also a versatile weapon that could adapt to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. As World War II loomed, French artillery's role was once again brought to the forefront. Although France had been behind in some technological areas, its artillery proved to be a potent weapon when used in the right hands. French artillery would go on to have significant successes during the war, particularly during the early stages, when it was used to devastating effect against the German forces. The ability to strike swiftly and with precision was what truly set French artillery apart from its competitors. The legacy of French artillery is one of continuous innovation and reinvention. From its early days of massed volleys on the battlefield to its resurgence as a modern weapon capable of striking with both speed and precision, the Queen of Battles has proven time and time again that while the world may underestimate it. French artillery will always rise again, more powerful and more impactful than ever before. The phrase, necessity is the mother of invention, couldn't ring truer when discussing the birth of modern artillery as the world entered the catastrophic phase of World War I. Military leaders were forced to reevaluate their tactics and strategies, particularly when it came to artillery. What had been the mainstay of battlefield dominance for centuries was now facing an existential crisis. The need for artillery that could keep up with the rapidly evolving nature of modern warfare was evident. During the early days of World War I, artillery was, by and large, a heavy and slow-moving force. The traditional large-caliber cannons, although effective for siege operations, lacked the mobility needed in the fast-moving warfare that was beginning to define the conflict. Artillery units, though formidable, were slow to reposition and were vulnerable to enemy fire. The traditional methods of firing from entrenched positions became obsolete as the nature of the war turned to one of rapid advances, with troops often moving in unpredictable ways across wide expanses of battlefield. As trench warfare ground the conflict to a halt, French and other Allied forces found themselves in a difficult predicament. The German forces had developed tactics that minimized the vulnerability of their artillery, relying on mobile fire seaports rather than fixed stations. The French army, known for its strong artillery tradition, had to adapt quickly to meet this new challenge. Out of this necessity came one of the most important innovations in modern artillery, the development of the howitzer. French artillery had already been experimenting with high-angle weapons, but the conditions of trench warfare demanded more. The French sought to build an artillery piece capable of firing explosive shells at steeper angles with greater accuracy and over longer distances. The French 75mm field gun, often considered the birth of modern artillery, was born from this need. This artillery piece became one of the most famous and effective weapons of World War I. Not only was it capable of firing shells with remarkable accuracy, but it also had the advantage of a unique recoil system that allowed it to fire faster and more reliably than previous models. This breakthrough significantly increased the speed and effectiveness of artillery barrages, allowing for precise strikes on enemy positions. The French 75mm field gun became known for its devastating impact on the German lines, especially during offensives, like the Second Battle of the Marne, where French artillery turned the tide of battle. By the time World War II approached, the world saw the legacy of these innovations. The French, who had pioneered so much of the technology that shaped artillery in the early 20th century, continued to push the boundaries of what was possible. France's artillery corps began experimenting with more mobile artillery systems capable of firing rapid, accurate shots without being easily targeted by the enemy. The introduction of self-propelled guns, artillery mounted on vehicles, allowed for more flexible positioning and quicker response times on the battlefield. These guns were equipped with powerful engines, making them more mobile and allowing for faster deployment. However, despite these advancements, France's artillery was often overlooked in favor of tanks and airplanes as World War II approached. This, however, would change as the war progressed. French artillery, already with decades of experience in the field, adapted to the new challenges posed by modern warfare. The true significance of French artillery would come to light as it proved itself time and again in the face of overwhelming odds. Artillery, once seen as an outdated and stationary force, was now seen as the key to victory. It was no longer just about firing shells from fixed positions. The French had revolutionized artillery to be faster, more mobile, and more precise, key characteristics that made it an invaluable tool in both offensive and defensive operations. The Advancements made during World War I and continued through World War II set the stage for future innovations in artillery, including the development of guided missiles and advanced targeting systems. France, a nation known for its innovative spirit, played a pivotal role in pushing artillery into the modern age. Despite its history of innovation and powerful presence on the battlefield, French artillery found itself in a difficult position in the years leading up to World War II. The world had witnessed the devastating effectiveness of French artillery during past conflicts, but by the early 20th century, the once feared force was seen by many as a relic of the past, unfit to face the new age of mechanized warfare. This perception would not only hinder the French military's ability to modernize, but also create a false sense of superiority among other nations, especially as tanks, aircraft, and other technologies came to dominate military strategy. After World War I, many military leaders across Europe believed that the future of warfare lay in tanks and air power. The rapid pace of technological advancement led to a shift in focus from the artillery that had once been the backbone of the French military. The success of tanks in the Battle of Cambrai in 1917 and the early promise of aircraft as versatile tools for reconnaissance, bombing, and combat quickly captured the imagination of military strategists. In the wake of such technological advances, artillery, particularly the French variety, was seen as slow, cumbersome, and outdated. The French military, however, was slow to adapt to the changing times. Although artillery still remained a significant part of their arsenal, its role began to diminish in favor of tanks and aviation. By the late 1930s, as World War II loomed on the horizon, many in the military establishment believed that artillery was no longer the queen of battles, but rather a supporting player in the larger mechanized warfare. Machy, the reluctance to modernize French artillery was partly a matter of tradition and institutional inertia. French artillery had always been a force of great pride, a symbol of military superiority and national identity. But this pride, while justifiable in many ways, made the French military resistant to new ideas and reluctant to embrace the full potential of new technologies. For instance, while the German military had been quick to recognize the importance of mobile artillery, including self-propelled guns, the French still relied heavily on more traditional methods. The French leadership clung to the belief that stationary artillery could still dominate the battlefield, despite the increasing mobility of enemy forces. This stubborn belief in the superiority of traditional artillery tactics would have dire consequences in the early stages of World War II. When the German Blitz swept through Europe in 1940, French forces were overwhelmed not by the power of the German artillery, but by their speed and mobility. The Germans had perfected the use of fast-moving tanks, combined arms tactics, and air support, all of which worked in tandem with their artillery. In contrast, the French artillery, which was still heavily reliant on slower-moving and less mobile guns, struggled to keep up with the fast pace of battle. As French forces retreated, many military observers were quick to criticize the outdated tactics and equipment used by the French. Artillery, once a symbol of French military pride, was now seen as ineffective in the face of modern, mobile warfare. Despite the early successes of the German army, however, the French artillery still had the potential to inflict serious damage, but it was too late for the world to recognize its true value. Even in the face of mounting losses, French artillery remained a force to be reckoned with. Its potential was evident during the Battle of France, where French artillery played a critical role in holding back the German advance in certain sectors. In particular, French artillery units stationed along the Maginot Line, a series of fortifications along the French-German border, fought valiantly against German forces. Though the Germans eventually bypassed the Maginot Line, the resilience of French artillery proved that the weapon had not lost its edge. As France's defeat seemed imminent, the world was left to question how such an advanced military power had failed so dramatically. Part Arf. The answer lay in the stubborn belief that traditional artillery, a weapon that had defined French military success for centuries, was no longer relevant in a rapidly changing world. In the end, this misplaced faith in the obsolescence of artillery prevented the French military from fully capitalizing on the weapon's potential. When the German forces launched their blitzkrieg through France in 1940, many believed that the French military was already a lost cause. The world had watched as the Germans rapidly advanced using a new, fast-paced style of warfare that combined the shock and speed of tanks, infantry, and air support to devastating effect. The French, on the other hand, were still relying on outdated strategies, including artillery that many considered too slow and cumbersome for modern combat. However, despite this overwhelming disadvantage, French artillery would prove to be far more resilient than expected, showing its true potential when the moment called for it. In the early stages of World War II, the French military had been slow to modernize its artillery. The old methods of massed firepower from stationary positions were no longer sufficient against the German tactics of rapid movement and constant engagement. Yet, even though France's leadership had underestimated the speed of warfare, French artillery was still a formidable force, albeit one that was not fully leveraged to its potential. As the German advance continued, the French were forced to adapt quickly. French military leaders realized that in order to survive the German onslaught, they needed to rethink their entire strategy, especially when it came to artillery. Instead of continuing with their reliance on static positions, the French began to reimagine how artillery could be used in a more fluid and dynamic battlefield. They began focusing on making artillery more mobile, faster, and more responsive to the shifting tides of combat. This shift marked the beginning of an artillery revolution, one that would redefine the role of artillery in future conflicts. One of the most innovative moves made by the French was the development of self-propelled artillery. Unlike traditional towed artillery, which required long setup times and vulnerable positions, self-propelled artillery could move with the advancing infantry and tanks. These mobile artillery units could reposition quickly, providing fire support where it was needed most, all while keeping up with the rapid movements of modern warfare. This change allowed French artillery to become an integrated part of their forces, rather than just a support element. Despite the advantages of self-propelled artillery, the French forces still faced an uphill battle. The German blitzkrieg was a juggernaut, and the French military, while beginning to adapt, was still caught off guard. But as the war progressed, French artillery's ability to strike quickly, precisely, and with devastating force became evident. In several key battles, French artillery proved capable of holding back the German advance, buying precious time for French infantry and tanks to regroup and reposition. The Battle of France saw French artillery play a pivotal role in countering the German forces. In particular, the French 75mm field gun, a weapon that had been a mainstay in the French arsenal for decades, was used with remarkable effectiveness. Although it had been overshadowed by newer weaponry, the 75mm gun, SE, speed of fire, and reliability made it a critical asset during defensive actions. Its ability to fire rapidly and accurately allowed French forces to counter German infantry assaults, and its long-range capability made it ideal for engaging German tanks from a distance. Even as the French forces were pushed back, artillery would prove to be a thorn in the side of the German army. French artillery units employed innovative tactics, such as counter-battery fire, using advanced techniques to pinpoint and destroy German artillery positions. These tactics disrupted the German advance and forced the enemy to fight harder for every inch of ground they gained. French artillery's success during this period was also a testament to the innovation of the soldiers and engineers who worked tirelessly to adapt their tactics and equipment. In a war where technological advances were constantly shifting the balance of power, French artillery's ability to evolve quickly, despite being underfunded and undervalued, gave them an edge when it counted most. As World War II continued, the lessons learned from this artillery revolution would reverberate through future conflicts. The ability to rapidly adapt to changing conditions and find innovative solutions to battlefield challenges would become a hallmark of modern artillery. French artillery had proven that, even when the odds seemed insurmountable, the power of well-executed artillery tactics could turn the tide of battle. In the chaotic world of warfare, artillery has long been a cornerstone of military strategy. But what makes artillery truly effective isn't just raw firepower, it's the combination of speed, precision, and adaptability on the battlefield. The French, despite their initial struggles in World War II, proved that artillery could be as fast and precise as any other weapon system, turning what was once a slow-moving force into a decisive, high-impact component of modern warfare. In the early stages of the war, French artillery suffered from a perception of being outdated, with tanks and airplanes taking center stage in military doctrine. Artillery was often seen as a supporting element, effective in a traditional sense, but not capable of adapting to the speed of modern warfare. However, this view soon changed as the French military began to recognize the critical importance of making their artillery units faster and more responsive. The shift was not only about speed, but also about striking with pinpoint precision. The heart of the transformation lay in the way French artillery units redefined mobility. In the past, artillery had been known for being stationary, often tied to entrenched positions. Moving artillery pieces took time and exposed them to enemy fire. But with the advent of self-propelled artillery, French forces were able to bring their firepower directly to the front lines, giving them the ability to respond immediately to rapidly shifting battle conditions. The mobility of these units was a French artillery could now follow the fast-moving tanks, providing consistent and effective fire support during offensive maneuvers. The French 105mm self-propelled howitzer became an essential weapon in the French arsenal, offering an unprecedented level of mobility and responsiveness for artillery units. It could move, shoot, and reposition much faster than traditional towed artillery, giving commanders the ability to keep pressure on the enemy without the delay of repositioning. Heavy equipment. Yet, speed alone is not enough to make artillery truly effective. Precision was equally important, especially as the enemy's forces adapted to the speed of the new warfare. In battles like the Battle of France, French artillery demonstrated its ability to strike with pinpoint accuracy. The French had long been known for their careful calculation and planning, and these traits were fully applied to artillery use. French artillery units were trained to adjust fire with incredible speed, ensuring that their barrages were not just overwhelming but strategically placed to hit vital enemy targets. One of the most notable examples of French artillery's precision was during the Battle of Dunkirk. In this critical battle, the French artillery was able to deliver incredibly accurate fire on German positions, causing significant disruption. Despite the overwhelming odds, their ability to adapt to the rapidly changing battlefront, moving their positions and delivering targeted fire, allowed the French to hold their ground longer than expected. In addition to mobility and precision, the effectiveness of French artillery also relied heavily on coordination with other branches of the military. French artillery was integrated into combined arms operations, working seamlessly with infantry, tanks, and air support. This coordination ensured that artillery was always in the right place at the right time, supporting breakthroughs, stalling advances, and neutralizing enemy positions with incredible efficiency. As the war progressed, the French military began to recognize that artillery wasn't just a weapon for the defense, it was a potent offensive tool. By focusing on speed and precision, French artillery could support offensive actions with as much impact as any tank or airstrike. The sheer speed of French artillery units, combined with their ability to strike with precision, ensured that they were a formidable force in any battle, capable of turning the tide. Even when they were outnumbered or outgunned, French artillery's effectiveness wasn't just a matter of technological advancements. It was also about the skill and ingenuity of the soldiers who operated it. These men had a deep understanding of the terrain, the dynamics of battle, and the importance of timing. Their training emphasized rapid repositioning, quick adjustment to changing conditions, and a focus on accuracy over sheer volume of fire. In the end, the combination of speed, precision, and innovation turned French artillery into a force to be reckoned with. Despite the initial underestimation and struggles, French artillery demonstrated that, when used effectively, it could shape the outcome of battles and change the course of the war. The success of French artillery in World War II would serve as a blueprint for future generations, proving that artillery, when adapted to modern warfare, could be just as effective as tanks or aircraft. When we think of the major innovations of modern warfare, it's easy to focus on the tanks, planes, and advanced technologies that reshaped the battlefield. Yet, there is one force that was long overlooked, its power lying dormant beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to awaken and demonstrate its true might. That force is French artillery, which, despite being sidelined in the early years of World War II, would rise again to show the world that it had the potential to be just as lethal and influential as any of its modern counterparts. In the years leading up to World War II, French artillery had been seen as a relic, stuck in the past while the rest of the military world moved forward. Despite its legacy of success in the previous centuries, artillery in France had become somewhat disconnected from the rapid pace of modern technological advancements. Tanks, airplanes, and machine guns had captured the spotlight, and artillery was relegated to a support role. However, this perception would soon be shattered by the rapid developments on the battlefield. As the German blitzkrieg stormed through Europe, French military leaders were forced to recognize the need for swift adaptation. While they had been caught off guard in the initial stages of the war, they quickly realized that artillery could play a far more crucial role in modern warfare if it could be reimagined to meet the needs of this fast-moving conflict. The artillery that had once been dismissed as slow and cumbersome was now seen as a weapon capable of turning the tide of battle, but only if it was used correctly. The French began to experiment with mobile artillery systems, using self-propelled guns and howitzers to keep up with the speed of mechanized infantry and armored divisions. This shift in tactics marked a dramatic change from the traditional method of deploying artillery in fixed positions. Self-propelled artillery gave the French the ability to move rapidly and engage enemy forces more dynamically, allowing them to apply pressure where it was most needed. These new artillery units could support armored advances, lay down suppressive fire, and provide pinpoint strikes in real time. The French 155mm self-propelled gun, for example, became a significant force in the war, showcasing the power of artillery when mobility and precision were combined. With the ability to quickly reposition, these guns could support infantry and tank units on the move, shifting the balance of firepower away from the static defenses that had once defined artillery's role. In key battles, such as the Battle of the Ardennes, French artillery began to show its true potential. By providing rapid-fire support, the French were able to disrupt German movements and slow their advance, creating opportunities for counterattacks and defensive actions. The Germans, who had been expecting to push through France with minimal resistance, were forced to adjust their strategy to contend with the reawakened power of French artillery. In addition to their effectiveness on the battlefield, French artillery also adapted its tactics to better respond to the evolving demands of modern warfare. The use of counter-battery fire became a hallmark of French artillery's renewed dominance. Instead of merely firing in support of ground troops, French gunners now targeted the enemy's artillery positions, neutralizing the threat before it could inflict significant damage on French forces. This shift in tactics not only enhanced the offensive capabilities of French artillery, but also provided much-needed protection to infantry and armored units. The reawakening of French artillery's power was also a testament to the innovative spirit of the soldiers and engineers who continually pushed the boundaries of what was possible. As the war progressed, French artillery units began to experiment with new types of ammunition, better targeting methods, and more effective communication systems, all of which allowed them to engage targets with greater accuracy and efficiency. The integration of French artillery with tanks, infantry, and air support also demonstrated the power of combined arms warfare, making it clear that artillery had a vital role to play in shaping the outcome of battles. Despite the rapid advancements made by the French in the use of artillery during World War II, their efforts remained somewhat overshadowed by the overwhelming success of German tactics and the rise of mechanized warfare. However, the lesson was clear. Artillery, when used effectively, was still one of the most powerful forces on the battlefield. The French military had proven that, even when the world had dismissed it, artillery could still rise to the occasion and change the course of war. In every major military conflict, there are always the well-known generals, the heroic leaders, and the iconic battles that dominate the history books. However, it is often the unsung soldiers, the ones who work tirelessly behind the scenes, who truly shape the outcome of wars. The story of French artillery in World War II is no different. While commanders and high-ranking officers often receive the glory, it was the soldiers operating the artillery pieces, the engineers designing innovative systems, and the tactical minds devising new strategies who turned the tide in battles that would otherwise have been lost. The role of the artilleryman or the gunner is often underestimated. The work is grueling, the positions are often dangerous, and yet the recognition is rare. Yet these soldiers were the backbone of any artillery unit, and without them the guns would have been useless. Whether it was loading shells, adjusting fire based on changing coordinates, or repairing damaged equipment under fire, it was these men who ensured that artillery could be used effectively and efficiently. Take the example of the French gunners during the early stages of World War II. In the chaos of the German Blitz, artillery units were initially overwhelmed by the speed and ferocity of the German advance. Yet, these unsung soldiers, armed with little more than their knowledge of their guns and their ability to adapt quickly to a rapidly changing battlefield, were able to provide critical support in holding back the tide. During the Battle of the Maginot Line, for instance, French artillery units played a pivotal role in stalling the German advance. While the line itself was eventually breached by the German forces, the artillery, positioned along its defenses, inflicted heavy casualties on the invaders, slowing them down long enough for French forces to regroup. However, the true impact of French artillery was not just in its firepower, but in the endurance of the soldiers behind the guns. While most of the world focused on the larger battles, it was often in smaller, less glamorous engagements that French artillery made the difference. In several cases, French gunners provided immediate fire support for French infantry units under siege, often arriving just in time to turn the tide of a battle. These soldiers may not have been celebrated or recognized by history books, but their actions directly contributed to the survival of French forces during some of the war's most trying moments. Another key aspect of their contribution was the resilience and adaptability displayed by the artillerymen. The fast-paced nature of World War II demanded that artillery units be able to reposition quickly, often under intense enemy fire. The ability of these soldiers to remain focused under pressure, to repair their guns, and to readjust fire for more accurate bombardment was crucial in ensuring that artillery remained an effective weapon throughout the war. French artillery's success was also a result of the collaborative effort between soldiers, engineers, and field commanders. These artillerymen often worked in tandem with infantry and tank divisions to provide fire support at just the right moment, enabling breakthroughs and forcing the enemy to retreat. However, this collaboration required intense coordination, and it was the often overlooked soldiers at the gun positions who made these synchronized attacks possible. While French artillery units were often seen as just one piece of the overall military machine, it was their unsung efforts that helped the French forces survive in the face of overwhelming odds. From the soldiers who operated the guns to the engineers who designed and maintained them, the entire artillery system was reliant on the skill and dedication of those who worked behind the scenes. In many ways, the story of French artillery is the story of these unsung heroes, those who were not recognized by the world, but whose actions were absolutely critical to the outcome of the war. Their contribution to the success of French artillery cannot be overstated, for without their ingenuity, resilience, and courage, the French would not have been able to challenge the German forces with such a potent weapon. Throughout history, warfare has been as much about technological innovation as it has been about strategy, tactics, and leadership. Every conflict has seen new technologies emerge, shifting the way battles are fought and often determining the outcome of wars. The story of French artillery's reawakening in World War II is no exception. In the face of overwhelming odds, France's ability to innovate under pressure, creating new artillery tactics and integrating modern technology, was a key factor in its ability to adapt to the rapidly changing dynamics of war. By the time World War II had begun, the French had already been pioneers in artillery development for decades. However, as the nature of warfare evolved, so too did the technology required to support it. The war presented challenges that artillery had not previously encountered, particularly the need for mobility and rapid response times in the face of mechanized warfare. Tanks, aircraft, and fast-moving infantry required artillery to be more than just a stationary force. It needed to be adaptable and responsive to the fluidity of modern battles. One of the major innovations that allowed French artillery to regain its power was the development and use of self-propelled artillery. The concept of self-propelled guns was not new, but the French military began to explore ways to make them faster, more mobile, and more efficient in delivering fire support. The introduction of the French 105mm self-propelled howitzer marked a turning point. Unlike traditional towed artillery, which could be slow to reposition and vulnerable to enemy fire, these self-propelled howitzer allowed French forces to quickly reposition their firepower and engage the enemy without the delays associated with moving stationary guns. These self-propelled artillery units were a testament to the French military's commitment to innovation. They allowed artillery units to keep up with fast-moving tank and infantry divisions, providing consistent fire support where it was needed most. The mobility of these artillery pieces was a game-changer, enabling French forces to shift their fire quickly and support offensives and defensive operations in real time. The ability to move artillery with the same speed as infantry and tanks was revolutionary, giving the French a vital tool in combat and allowing them to strike quickly and decisively. In addition to improving mobility, the French military also embraced technological advances in targeting and ammunition. During the war, the use of fire control systems became increasingly important. These systems allowed artillery units to calculate and adjust firing solutions more quickly and accurately, leading to greater precision on the battlefield. French artillery crews could now adjust their fire more effectively, even in the face of changing conditions, increasing their overall effectiveness and reducing the risk of hitting friendly forces. But perhaps the most significant technological leap came with the integration of radar and targeting devices into French artillery units. Radar systems allowed artillery to detect enemy positions and track their movements with greater precision, enabling gunners to target specific enemy positions more accurately. This was especially important during the Battle for Normandy, where the use of radar-assisted artillery allowed French forces to neutralize German artillery positions that would have otherwise been difficult to detect and target. The use of modernized shells and ammunition also played a critical role in this new era of French artillery. Advances in shell design allowed for greater penetration and more powerful explosive effects, making French artillery capable of taking on German tanks and fortifications with much more effectiveness. These new artillery shells could deliver devastating firepower from a distance, creating chaos within enemy lines and breaking their defenses. While many other nations were focused on building the latest and greatest tanks or fighter planes, the French military's ability to adapt and integrate these artillery innovations gave them a unique advantage. By embracing the changing face of warfare, French artillery was able to become a dynamic force that could meet the demands of modern conflict. The effectiveness of French artillery in World War II was not just a result of better technology, but of the French military's willingness to innovate and adapt to new challenges, proving that technological innovation can dramatically alter the course of warfare. The battle for innovation in artillery was not just about creating new weapons or tactics, it was about a mindset, the ability to look at a problem and think outside the box. To reimagine how artillery could be used in a world dominated by tanks and aircraft is what made French artillery so powerful. It was a battle not just for survival, but for the future of military strategy. And in this battle, French artillery proved that it could still be a dominant force on the battlefield. The story of French artillery during World War II is more than just one of innovation and adaptation. It's a story of how surprising tactics can rewrite history. What began as an underappreciated and underestimated force was able to rise to prominence once again, altering the course of battle and leaving a lasting legacy in the annals of military history. French artillery's effectiveness during the war didn't just change how wars were fought, it reshaped the entire landscape of modern warfare. At the heart of this transformation was the French ability to adapt and innovate quickly in the face of overwhelming adversity. When the Germans launched their lightning-fast blitzkrieg across Europe, many believed that the French military, with its reliance on outdated methods, would quickly collapse. However, French artillery, despite being caught off guard in the early stages of the war, quickly adapted, becoming a decisive force in several key engagements. By developing mobile artillery units and refining their tactics, the French were able to hold back German forces and create critical moments of resistance. One of the most significant moments came during the Battle of France in 1940, when French artillery managed to delay the German advance through the Ardennes. Despite being overwhelmed by German tanks and air superiority, French artillery units, using their innovative, self-propelled guns and fast-moving tactics, inflicted heavy casualties on the Germans, showing the world that even when facing impossible odds, French artillery could still alter the course of a battle. This battle demonstrated the power of French artillery to disrupt the enemy's advance, forcing the Germans to rethink their strategy and giving the French forces much-needed time to regroup. Similarly, during the D-Day invasion and the subsequent Normandy campaign, French artillery played a crucial role in countering German defenses. The use of mobile, highly responsive artillery units allowed the French to provide support for Allied forces, ensuring that the German defenses were dismantled from both the ground and air. The ability to reposition quickly and adjust fire with pinpoint precision made French artillery a vital asset, even when the odds were stacked against them. What makes the impact of French artillery so significant is that it wasn't just about firepower, it was about its ability to change the flow of battle. Artillery, once seen as a passive force on the battlefield, became a driving element in offensive operations. The innovations in mobility, precision, and integration with other military units turned French artillery into a dynamic weapon, capable of adapting to the needs of the moment. These tactics, once considered outdated, were now seen as the future of warfare. Moreover, the lessons learned from French artillery's reawakening would go on to influence military doctrine for decades to come. The integration of artillery with mechanized infantry and tanks combined arms tech, a central feature of post-war military strategies. The French Army's ability to innovate and adapt to the challenges of modern warfare would inspire future generations of artillerymen and military strategists worldwide. The lasting influence of these tactics can still be seen in modern artillery, which continues to evolve and adapt to the changing landscape of warfare. The real power of French artillery, however, lies not just in its technological advancements or its ability to innovate under pressure. It lies in the story of its resurgence against all odds. It serves as a reminder that no military force should ever be underestimated. Even when the world dismisses a weapon or a strategy, the potential for it to surprise, innovate, and reshape the course of history is always there. French artillery proved that true power lies not in complacency, but in the ability to evolve, to adapt, and to respond to the needs of the battlefield. Today, the legacy of French artillery stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unyielding will to fight against the odds. From its pivotal role in World War I to its resurgence in World War II, French artillery's impact on military history cannot be overstated. It didn't just change battles, it changed how wars were fought, ensuring that artillery would remain a cornerstone of military power for generations to come. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. What did you think of the incredible story of French artillery? Do you believe that artillery still holds a place in modern warfare? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden power of French artillery, make sure to leave a like to support the channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story from history. For those of you who stuck with us to the end, I have a challenge for you. Comment below with the phrase "the Queen of Battles" and let us know which other underrated military forces you'd like to learn about in the future. Also, be sure to check out the next video in this series. It's coming up right now on your screen.